Imagine you're living in times of war, and you are looking to conquer other nations. So you bring your armies out to invade. There's plenty of problems, though. First of all, you're losing tons of precious human capital. The country that you're invading is probably not going to take this well, too. They'll most likely send their own troops in, causing a bloody war that will drag on forever. At the end of it, even if you win the battle, you may not get the support of the people whose families and friends you just murdered. So, how do you go about your conquest without the backlash? For China, this is the beginning of their Belt and Road Initiative, one of the world's largest infrastructure projects that no other country could compete with.
世界好，中国才会好。中国好，世界会更好。
In 2013, China is looking to build up their crucial infrastructure, including railways, ports, and hospitals, to rapidly expand the nation's growth. For them, the solution was to create a huge number of Chinese state-owned enterprises, which allowed them to allocate massive resources to these expansion projects. But now that the job is mostly done, what's next for these enterprises? After all, there's only so many highways you can build, even with a land area as big as China. Profit was going down, and a reform was desperately needed. This is where the Belt and Road Initiative comes in. Let's call it BRI for short. The General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, announced the BRI during an official visit to Kazakhstan, which was termed as the Silk Road Economic Belt back then.
President Xi Jinping was at 10 years ago, right here at this podium, where he made that speech proposing the Belt and Road Initiative. And the people around here who listened to that speech say it was really more about the people-to-people friendship and the exchange of people and students and promoting this growth among the younger generation.
The BRI is a development and investment strategy that aimed to improve trade and economic relations among Asia, Europe, and Africa. It does so by pouring in investments into transport, energy, and telecommunication along the ancient Silk Road trade networks. At the same time, the companies that are paid to build these are their state-owned enterprises that are looking for more profit. So not only do these enterprises get a lease of new life by working on large infrastructure projects, it also gives China economic growth by boosting trade in and out of the country. Yet another advantage is that China gets to foster their political relations with the host countries of these infrastructure, allowing it to assert its influence on a global level, a win on all levels. There is, however, a tiny flaw, and like China, other developed countries have literally no more room for any more infrastructure build. As for developing countries, they seem to be the perfect customers for this project, as these are precisely the countries that require an infrastructure upgrade. One example is the flagship project of the BRI is the Jakarta-Bandung high-speed rail in Indonesia, which helped to boost trade and tourism. But the big problem is the government themselves of these developing countries are in no position to pay for these expensive projects, which is why they are playing catch-up to the developed countries in the first place. But trust the Chinese to come up with an elegant solution, for them that is. The next part to the BRI strategy is debt. This grand strategy can be boiled down to a three-pronged approach. Step 1, sell the vision. Step 2, introduce debt. Step 3, profit. Now, let's get into how these three steps work. Step 1, it's all about image. You have to sell what this project could do for the country that you're stepping into. Just imagine being told a story of super growth, where you can become an economic superpower with an unbelievable rise for your country's standard of living, just as China has done. Now, who wouldn't want that? China did this through several strategies, such as high-level diplomatic engagements, hosting economic conferences, media and public campaigns, and soft power initiatives like cultural events and language programs. They even hired the global consulting powerhouse, McKinsey & Co., to further boost their credibility. According to their so-called study, The BRI has the potential to lift a group of countries that will contribute to 80% of global economic growth and bring 3 billion people into the middle class by 2050. Sounds like a gold mine, doesn't it? And now, once you've sold your product well, you have set yourself up to step 2, which is to introduce debt. You and the developing countries have agreed on what infrastructure to build. And even better, you're offering them the top-tier expertise of your state-owned enterprise to move these projects along. Again, the problem is, these countries don't have the ability to fork out the money right now. So, as the benevolent big brother that wants to help these countries develop, what do? You loan money. Just as how someone would borrow from a bank to finance their home mortgage, the developing countries borrow large sums of money from Chinese banks themselves. It seems to paint a rosy picture. The Chinese are doing all they can to make sure that this project is a success for the developing countries. This is where things start to get a little muddy. The last step, step 3, is to profit. Just as an individual has to repay their bank mortgages with interest, these developing countries will have to pay interests to the Chinese banks. Unfortunately, it's not that easy for the developing countries to repay their debts. Due to the huge debt amount, unfavorable loan terms for the developing countries, and contract terms that limits their ability to seek alternative funding sources or restructure their debt. The longer they take to repay their debt, the larger it grows. And the larger it grows, the more power China has over them. Let's not forget, unlike an individual's bank mortgage, these are happening on a geopolitical level, and thus will have geopolitical consequences. But before we get into this, we shall see how China had skillfully set the conditions to ensure an upper hand in this game of musical chairs. Now, if we're discussing musical chair, you must have the perfect music. And if you're a musician, creator, or marketer, having a library of high-quality, royalty-free tracks is essential. But fear not. Say goodbye to endless searches and copyright headaches, because I've got something special for you. Introducing Epidemic Sound, the ultimate solution for all your music needs. With over 40,000 tracks and 90,000 sound effects, their catalog is second to none. Discover the perfect soundtrack for your content with ease. Whether you're in the mood for something upbeat or mellow, Epidemic Sound has you covered. And the best part? You can try Epidemic Sound for free with their 7-day free trial. So why wait? Scroll down, click the link below, and start your free trial now. Don't miss out on the opportunity to soundtrack your stories with Epidemic Sound. Get started today. Now back to the video. There is a Chinese saying which translates to reveal the horse's hoof. It came from a story where a horse was attempting to disguise itself, but in the end, its true identity got revealed when its hoof got spotted. In other words, it is having one's true colors revealed. The No Paris Club clause, a simple but powerful term in many of the debt agreements, illustrates how this saying can be applied towards China. And what exactly is the Paris Club, you may ask? Let's take a step back to 1956, where Argentina was faced with a debt crisis. The crisis was a result of their high inflation rates, excessive borrowing, and political instability. Faced under immense pressure, Argentina sought the assistance of its creditors, including the USA, France, and Germany. Keen to assist Argentina with its debt and to prevent defaulting, these countries met in Paris and negotiated on how the debt could be restructured, like rescheduling the debt repayment dates and reducing interest rates. Thus, the Paris Club was formed to deal with sovereign debt restructuring by providing coordinated solutions for debtors to promote global financial stability and prevent crises. To date, the Paris Club is made up of major creditor countries, with 22 permanent members, including the G7 countries, and have reached over 400 agreements with hundreds of debtors. They value solidarity, consensus, transparency, and information sharing in their decision-making process between the debtors and creditors. So, as a country that is collapsing under the weight of the growing debt, appealing to the Paris Club would be a lifeline for avoiding a nationwide crisis. Now back to the BRI. China has not joined Paris Club despite being one of the largest creditors in the world. This allows them to be secretive in their loan agreements. So, by design, China can work out an agreement that goes against the Paris Club. And worse still for their developing countries, let's not forget their crafty No Paris Club clause. These countries are stuck in these agreements and are unable to rely on the Paris Club for help. But why did the developing countries agree on this term? Well, remember how well China sold the vision when they introduced the BRI. It's true that the BRI has achieved some positive outcomes, which is what it had said it would do in the first place. After all, if the project was so terrible, it wouldn't have grown on such a massive scale. As Richard Branson of the Virgin Group said in 2017, the Belt and Road Initiative is the only winning infrastructure strategy that can spur growth globally. Take Thailand, for example. The export of durian would not have been possible 10 years ago due to the time taken for transportation, but now it takes less than 6 days to export fresh durians to China. As for Cambodia, the Sihanoukville Special Economic Zone was rapidly built up to house about 100 Chinese factories for textiles and food industries. This provided jobs for 100,000 workers, who are mainly Cambodians, living around the area. Workers who used to have a lower income are now able to earn more to do things like purchasing their own motorcycles. On the surface, China continues to paint a benevolent picture. Li Yucheng, the Chinese Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, had said, "Some countries may face difficulties in repaying the debt, but we will not press down hard on them. When they encounter difficulties, normally we will take flexible measures." But behind the scenes, these flexible measures are tailored to ensure that China comes out as the winner, especially when they negotiate behind closed doors with countries that are not as financially savvy. Let's do a deeper dive into how China profits from the debt strategy. Earlier in this video, we learned how China had used the BRI to expand its own state-owned enterprises and how it operates outside the Paris Club. Now, let's put the two together. You see, when these enterprises get the large government contracts from the developing countries, they are funded by the loans issued by China's state-owned banks to these countries. Money is getting moved around, but essentially, the trillions of dollars are going directly from the Chinese banks into the Chinese corporations, meaning they have never left the Chinese's pockets, whereas the Chinese banks get to collect the interest from the debtors' loans, meaning pure profit. Since the BRI started, many have speculated on China's strategy called string of pearls. Essentially, China accumulates power through the networks they have developed across the region, just like gathering pearls on a string. Through investments, they now have access to strategic ports in countries like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar. Not only does this increase their economic influence, they can also use these ports to shore up their naval presence in the region. Their growing closeness to the various countries also increases their political influence on the world stage. As for the debt situation, debtors may feel pressured to support China on international platforms. This phenomena has been termed China's debt diplomacy. As you can see, this allows China to steadily increase its power over its debtor countries, giving it the upper hand against regional competitors like India, and even challenging America's dominating influence in these developing countries. Let's hop on over to South Asia, to a country called Sri Lanka, to see how this played out. It all starts with a man called Mahinda Rajapaksa, who was the country's president from 2005 to 2015. His administration looked after the creation of the Hambantota port as part of the BRI. He had envisioned the port as a great symbol of development of Sri Lanka, where it would achieve economic growth and increase influence in the Indian Ocean. It was going to be the key achievement of his presidency. India had initially offered to work with Sri Lanka, but after concerns about the economic viability, India decided to pull out. To fund this massive project, Sri Lanka then turned to China. China officially came on board as part of the BRI. It seemed to be a win for everybody. Sri Lanka got massive resources for this project, including funds and the expertise and technologies of Chinese companies. China, on the other hand, furthers its power in the Indian Ocean region, while keeping their state-owned enterprises busy with new projects. The first phase of the port was opened in 2010. However, when you take a closer look at their agreement, things are not as rosy as they seem. For example, one loan condition they took with the Chinese bank was that the Chinese state-owned enterprises could jointly operate the port with Sri Lanka. They would also have a 65% stake in the port for 35 years, making them the majority stakeholder. At the same time, Sri Lanka was starting to get buried in debt. And, as we now know, this would only increase China's influence on them over time. We can see this from the controversial lease agreement that Sri Lanka had signed with China in exchange for debt relief and more investment. This lease agreement gave one of the Chinese enterprises the majority stake in the port for 99 years. Of course, this didn't go unnoticed by the people of Sri Lanka, and indeed, the world. Viewing this as a despicable land grab by China, Sri Lankans took to the streets to protest. Unfortunately, the wheels have already been long set in motion, and there is nothing much the people can do. What does the future of the BRI look like after a decade since it was first introduced? Reportedly, 25% of its loans have gone bad, and China has had to step in repeatedly to bail out the developing countries.
China is no longer interested in giving away free money to build very expensive trans-border railways. A lot of things have changed.
By 2016, 2017, China's leaders were realizing that a lot of loans had been made that were quite risky investments.
Despite warnings from critics, over 140 countries and organizations have signed agreements under the BRI. So, what's the lesson that we can learn here? In a world dominated by the haves and have-nots, something's got to give. In the end, China is only doing what other world superpowers have been doing for ages. Is it fair to see China as the bad guy here? That would be too black and white. Instead, it's probably more accurate to see this as yet another development in the chess game that's been played for centuries between countries, and whoever strategizes well to make the right moves wins. Thanks for watching this video till the end. If you'd like to see more videos on Asians, finance, and business, be sure to like and subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to seeing you for my next video.